Hello, I can see some of the attendees coming in. If you notice, you guys are muted. If you do have any questions or anything, you can talk to me in the chat feature, which should be available for you. We'll give everyone a couple minutes to come in and then we'll begin. I apologize, my air filter, air purifier, going a little crazy. All right, we'll give everyone one more minute. Welcome to more people who are coming in. You'll notice that you're muted. If you do have any questions, you can go to the chat feature and shoot me a chat. No, I can't see you. So yeah, that feature is disabled here. So you can see me, I can't see you. So if you do have any questions, like I said, feel free to use that chat feature and I'll have that up throughout the presentation so I can see what's going on. Oh, I keep doing Hello. Okay, so we gave everyone a couple minutes, so as they come trickling in, they can definitely come in. Just fix this bad boy. Okay. Welcome. Good evening. Good. This will be this is an hour-long training, so it'll be about an hour. Last time I did it, I finished after like 50 minutes and then opened it up for 10 minutes of questioning. So yeah, it'll be about that much. Hello, hello. Welcome. All right, so let's begin. So welcome. Today we'll be talking about strategies for teaching and increasing communication. This presentation was developed by Kelsey Hausbar and myself. I'm Janae Dominguez. I am a BCBA here at Bierman ABA, and I'm happy to dive into this topic with you. So let's begin. I'm also going to turn off my video just so I find myself a little distracting, but I will obviously be here and I'll have the chat up the whole time. So I'm happy to answer questions throughout. Whoops. Okay, let's begin. So during this webinar, everyone will be muted. This is an active participation webinar in which I'll be pausing frequently to ask questions. You can respond with the chat feature, which I've seen a lot of you can see. For the chat feature, you can send your answers either to me or to all panelists. I'll refrain from saying any names when I do get chats and won't use any children's names throughout the presentation. The chat is the easiest and most efficient way to communicate throughout the webinar. If you chat to panelists and attendees, everyone can see your responses versus if you just chat to panelists. Oh, well, I guess you guys can still see me, but I can't see it. So that's all that really matters. But yeah, so if you want everyone to see your answers, you can have that attendees option, or if you just want me to, it will go to just panelists, which I think everyone is kind of already doing. So it's just coming to me. And then like I said, won't specify any names or anything super specific to your child if you don't want me to. So the objectives of this presentation are to identify your child's preferred method of communication, learn about the verbal operands, identify ways to increase your child's communication, and understand the link between some challenging behavior and communication. A pretty full course load. So let's first talk about, how does your child communicate? There are many different ways to communicate. It's possible that your child is still figuring out which type of communication is easiest for them. Let's talk about how your child assesses things he or she wants. So we're going to start off with a poll, and this should be easy for you guys to do as well. So I'm going to launch it. You can see it. So how does your child communicate their wants and needs? Do they do 1, pointing or leading you to an item that they want, 2, a see device or picture exchange, 3, vocal verbal language, or 4, sign language? I'll give you guys a couple seconds to respond. This will also help me kind of talk about every mode of communication. Cool. You can also, I see some people responding in the chat. You should be able to do it in the poll as well. If not, not a big deal. All right, I'll give you guys like 10 more seconds. All right, so I'll share the results with you. Oops. So as you can see, it seems like 67% of you have children who point or lead you to an item that they want, and then 33% of you have children that engage in vocal verbal language. All right. So now we're going to talk about verbal behavior. So B.F. Skinner was an American psychologist and behaviorist whose works laid the foundation for the field of applied behavior analysis. So verbal behavior, as defined by B.F. Skinner, is behavior reinforced through the mediation of other people. So while some behavior is vocal, all kids are speaking in some way, in a verbal way. So verbal behavior is an umbrella term, as you can see, and under it falls vocal communication, gestures, sign language, AAC devices, and picture exchange or picture communication. So now I'm going to dive into some examples of different types of communication. We'll obviously give more attention to the types of communication that you see with your learners. So for gesture communication, an example of this would be Riley's hungry for a snack, so she went to her mom and grabbed her hand. Riley guided her mom to the pantry and reached toward the doorknob. Riley's mom opened the pantry door, and Riley pointed to a box of crackers. So she's using a gesture to communicate and like leading her mom to where she wants to go, which seems like a lot of you have communicators that do this. There's also picture exchange. So in this example, Caden's playing with his toys by the window when he saw his neighbor running outside. Caden grabbed his picture book, so it could look something like this. It's filled with icons of all of his favorite things, and grabbed the picture of outside. Caden handed this picture to his mom. So picture exchange communication is something that we can teach to your children. It's a way for them to communicate, and again, it has exchanging pictures. There's an example of AAC. So for this, Billy wants to watch Bubble Guppies on TV. He grabs his AAC device, walks up to his dad, and navigates to the device to have the device say, "I want to watch Bubble Guppies." So similar to picture exchange communication, there are picture icons throughout the AAC device that signal different items or activities, and our learners learn to press the different buttons and navigate throughout the AAC device to get their wants and needs met and to communicate with us. And then there's vocal communication. So this one is John's walking with his mom to the park. He sees the dog and says, "Look, a dog." And his mom says, "Yeah, it's a dog." So this one is what a lot of you see in how I'm communicating with you today. And then there's sign language. So This one is like Bailey's eating lunch in his high chair, signs all done, and starts pushing away his food. Bailey's mom took away his plate and got him out of the high chair. So signing and all done. Some children, a lot of children learn a little bit of sign. So everyone has a role. So language includes a listener and a speaker. Each person has a specific role and purpose. The listener plays an important role for the speaker. So they signal reinforcement for the speaker, they build motivation. Without the listener, the speaker would have no reason to communicate. Sometimes you're the listener and then the speaker. The same is true for your child. So now let's talk about verbal operands. So this is something that you, if you're new to Bierman or new to ABA, you may not know. If you are not new to us and have been with us for a while, I'm sure that you've heard this. We talk about verbal operands constantly. So here on the left, I have the technical phrase, and then I have on the right, like the layman's terms. So we'll talk about mands, which are requests. So this is just like, I want a cookie. I want to go to Six Flags. I want cake. These are all the requests that your children are making. Tacting is labeling. So that's labeling things in their environment. So I see a dog. I say, there's a dog. I smell maybe cake and I say, oh, it smells like cake. I'm labeling things in my environment. I'm tacting. Interverbal, which is conversation. So answering questions, singing a song. Interverbal is how we communicate as well. So you say, Old MacDonald had your child responds, farm. That's an interverbal. Or you say, hey, how's it going? And they say, I'm good, how are you? That's an interverbal, it's a conversation. Echoic is repeating a word or phrase. So for this, it'd say like, say dog, your child says dog. They're echoing my behavior. And listener behavior or receptive language, so following directions. So you tell your child, go pick up your socks, they go and pick up their socks. So now we're gonna go into another poll. This poll is saying, what operand does your child communicate most with you? Is it 1, mands or requests, 2, tacts, 3, interverbals, 4, echoics, 5, 2 or more? And I'm gonna launch that poll right now. So you should be able to see it on your screen. Wow, you guys are speedy. So if a child is nonverbal, which one would you choose? So this could be like if your child is leading you to something, and so like they lead you towards like the pantry to get something, or they gesture for you to grab something, I would say that was like a request. If they are nonverbal, maybe they're pointing to items, they outside and they're looking at, they see a bird, that would be a label. Interverbal would be maybe like if you're reading a book and you're like, I see a dog, or you can say like, Old MacDonald had a, and they point to the farm, or they, woof woof says that and they point to the dog. That could be an interverbal. So I would kind of decide which one. Okay, great. All right, let me end the poll and then I'll let you guys see it. So this one, it looks like 47% of you said mands or requests, 6% said tacts or labels, 12% said interverbals or conversation, 6% said echoics, and 29% said 2 or more operands. So that's great. So it looks like we have a little smattering of everything, which is perfect because we'll be talking about all of these. Okay. And now another poll is, what operant would you like to increase with your child? So now that we know they kind of do a smattering of all of these, which behavior or which operant do you want to see an increase in with your child? So if they're requesting a lot, maybe you want them to have more conversations, maybe you want to have tacts, maybe you want to have everything. That's up to you. You guys are really fast. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay. All right. So a lot of you said, 29% of you said interverbals, so conversations, and then 71% of you said all of the above. So you would like to see mands, tacts, and interverbals. Great. Okay. We'll stop on the polls for a little bit. So now I'm going to jump into what every operant looks like for each type of communicator, and then how to increase them for each type of communicator. So I might gloss over some of them because it seems like they're not, you guys don't have a lot of kids who are engaging in some of these, but we'll kind of go through a little bit of it. All right, so for mands or request, on the left, you'll see the communication method, and on the right, it'll say how your child can request. So for gesture communication, it seems like there's quite a few people who have that, who have children who are engaging in that type of communication. So you would hold out 2 options of snacks, grapes and oranges that your child can have, and your child points to the orange. So that is how they are telling you that they want something. They're like, this is what I want. I'm pointing to it, or I'm leading you to it. Picture exchange would be you read a book with your child and ask them, what do you want to read? Your child looks into their PEX books, which is their picture exchange communication book, and selects brown bear picture and hands it to you. And then you would read the book. Sign language, your child is drinking orange juice and finishes it, looks at you and signs more. Vocal language, your child's reaching in the pantry for cookies, you say cookie. Your child repeats cookies and you give it to them. An AAC device is you're playing with dolls and dolls need a dress. You gesture to the AAC and your child navigates to the clothing page and presses dress, and then you hand them a dress for the doll. So how do we increase requests? So depending on your child, it'll always be a little different, but these are some tried and true methods. So you can provide options of items for your child to pick from. So like in the example that I had prior to this, instead of just anticipating their wants and needs and just like giving them something, you can provide options and be like, you want this or this, and letting them request that. So giving them that opportunity and that time to voice what they want, or to gesture, or to exchange a picture, or to sign, and be able to have that request honored. Like I said, wait for your child instead of to request instead of anticipating their wants and needs. I know I'm not a parent, but I work with a lot of parents, and I know that sometimes it is easier. You know that they love cookies, and you know that that's like a tried and true method. Sometimes you're just like, I know you're going to want this, you can have this. But instead of doing that, maybe holding off and holding on to the cookies and maybe having them in sight and just waiting for them to say cookie, or to point to it, or like I said, to exchange a picture. Modeling how to request is such an important skill too. So your children are little sponges, they're picking up everything. So modeling how to do it, being like showing that requesting is something that we do throughout our life, and to be like, hey, can you give me the fork? Can you pass me this? Just modeling what it looks like throughout their day, so that they can see that this is how we communicate. And if they are a device user, which it sounds like they aren't, but they could be at some point, having their device or PEX board out in your home. So this is really important. So at Bierman, if we are using a PEX board or using an AAC device, we have those devices with our clients, with your children throughout the day. They always have them with them. They always have them available. We want that to be replicated at home as well. We want them to be able to have their device and have the ability to communicate with you at all times. So if your child does use an AAC or PEX board, having that out and having that available for them throughout their day at home will really help increase those requests. Now let's talk about tags, which are labels. So again, on the left is communication method, and on the right is how your child can label. So for gesture, you're out with your child on a walk, they point to a bird flying, you reply, that's a bird, while pointing at it with your child. So that's them labeling it. Maybe they're not speaking it or exchanging a picture, but they're showing you that, like, hey, I see what's going on in the environment, and I want to share that with you. Picture exchange, your child and you are looking at a book, your child looks through his PEX board and shows you the dog icon when you look at a dog on the page. So you're reading, that's labeling what he or she is seeing. Sign language, your child hears music and signs music to you. So again, labeling another sense of hearing. Vocal language, you're driving your child to the park, you stop at a red light and your child says red light. So they see that red light and they are labeling what they see in their environment. And AAC, you and your child are making cookies in the kitchen, you get a spoon and stir the batter, your child gets the AAC device, navigates to the utensil page and touches spoon on their device. So again, they see the spoon and they're like, hey, that's a spoon. So how do we increase labeling? Again, modeling is going to be such a big tool for you. So model language in your home and out in the community with the same mode of communication your child uses, and with your vocal language. So if you have children that are gesturing a lot, you can gesture to things that you're seeing in your environment while also labeling them vocally or verbally. So you'll, like I said, you see a bird, you say, look, there's a bird vocally, and you also sign bird, or you point to the bird in their textbook or their AAC. So again, you're showing them using their mode of communication, and then you're also supplementing it with yours. So you're saying, there's a bird, there's a cat, there's a dog. And like I said, if you have the textbook, you would find that picture of a bird and be like, there's a bird right there. Do you see it? Letting them know, like make that connection. Same with AAC, same with sign, same with gestures. And then when your child does label what's occurring in their environment, you can provide attention and praise to their behavior. So I know, so if your child is, like I said, in the car and being like, red light, like, yeah, that is a red light. You're so right. Let's see what the light comes next. Like, or, oh, they see a red car. Like, I see a red car too. Let's see how many other red cars we can find on this drive. Just reinforcing that and like letting them know that that's something that we want to see more of and giving them that attention. Now let's talk about interverbal conversations. This is something that everyone really wanted to have. So the communication method, and then as on the left again, and then on the right is how your child can engage in it. So in gesture communication, you hold up 2 pictures of animals and maybe say, meow says that, and your child points to the cat picture. So this way they're showing you that they are finishing your sentence in a way that aligns with the way that they're communicating currently. There's picture exchange. So you ask your child, what's your favorite color? Your child looks through their textbooks and gives you a yellow card. So they're saying yellow is my favorite color. Sign language, you sign how are you? And your child says good. You could even say how are you? And your child could sign good. Vocal language, you say old MacDonald had a, and your child responds to farm vocally. And then AAC, you say A, B, and your child navigates to the letters page and says C. So how do we increase conversation? So for early learners, a great way to increase conversations is to start with fill-in statements. So fill-in statements are like songs, so like Old MacDonald, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, Happy Birthday. And you would do this like I modeled before. So you'll be like, twinkle, twinkle, little, and you can point to them, you can wait, look at them, and see if they say star, or like I said, exchange, something like that. Something that is really simple and really easy for them will probably be best, and like something that always has the same answer. You can also do animal sounds. So you can do a dog says, and they say woof, a cat says meow, a cow says moo. And then simple associations. So you can go, on your head you wear a, you would say hat, shoes and socks, you ride a bike. So starting with these are the building blocks of how to increase communication, increase conversations later on. So putting it all together. While your child may be good at asking for something they want, they still may not know how to communicate in all the different ways. That's why it's important to teach across all of the operands. So if you see this picture of a chocolate cake, if you're hungry for a cake, you know how to ask for it, so you demand a request. If you see cake and want to point it out to someone, you know how to do that because you're tacting. And if you want to have a conversation with a baker about the ingredients in the cake, you just ask. So interverbal, so you'd say, what's in the cake? So we at Bierman and most ABA companies are teaching across operands. So we're teaching requesting, we're also teaching labeling, we're teaching interverbals, echoics, and listener responding as well. Let's talk about form versus function. So in behavior analysis, the focus on vocal behavior or verbal behavior is what your child gets through speech, so function. In contrast, other professionals such as an SLP, which is a speech language pathologist, place their focus on the form. So how a word is formed with the mouth, what language is developmentally appropriate, etc. To thoroughly analyze verbal behavior, a focus on both the function and the form must be achieved. So let's think. Earlier, we talked about how your child communicates, so the form. Now let's talk about the function of your child exhibits. So a question that you may be asking is, why is my child engaging in challenging behavior instead of using functional communication? So now we're going to review the functions of behavior, one of like the big tenets of our field. So we believe there are 4 main functions of behavior. They're access to an item or activity, escape from a demand or aversive situation, attention from others, or sensory stimulation. So it's not contingent on others. So let's talk about each of this. So for access of an item, your child wants something. So how do they communicate their wants and needs to you? So it sounds like it's, like I said, most of you had either like vocal, so your child is saying, I want cookie or cookie, or like leading or gesturing. Escape from a demand. So for this, maybe you ask your child to clean up their toys and they still want to play. How do they communicate that they want to keep playing? Do they ask for more time? Do they exchange a 1 more minute picture? Do they say no, or do they sometimes engage in a tantrum? Attention from others. So how does your child gain attention from others? Do they call your name? Do they sign? Do they tap you? Do they yell? Do they engage in challenging behavior like throwing? And then how do they seek sensory stimulation? So sensory stimulation is not contingent on others. So something about that behavior itself is reinforcing. So this could look like scripting videos or songs. So you might see your child repeating things that they hear or see. So like if they hear like a radio ad and then they kind of just repeat the same thing, that's could be sensory stimulation. Spinning, looking at lights. For the purpose of this presentation, we'll be diving more into access, escape, and attention, and not so much sensory stimulation. So how is communication linked to challenging behavior? Oftentimes, our children don't have a socially appropriate way to communicate, and as a result, engage in challenging behavior to get their wants and needs met. So how do we help? We can use functional communication to replace challenging behavior. So you can see in this visual, as functional communication increases, ideally challenging behavior will decrease. So let's talk about how communication can replace challenging behavior. So what is replacement behavior? Replacement behavior is behavior that is socially appropriate that allows your child to gain reinforcement without engaging in challenging behavior. And how do we know what replacement behavior to model? So we can determine what the cause of the behavior is and prompt an appropriate response. So when we're thinking about replacement behavior, we want to think about 3 things. We want to think about what is the behavior? So what behavior are they engaging in? What is the function of the behavior? So is it access? Is it attention? Is it escape? Is it sensory stimulation? And what replacement behavior can I prompt? So let's dive into that. So I went into a few examples of how we could do this. So these are examples of how to prompt replacement behavior. So you tell your child it's time to go to bed and they begin to cry and throw toys. So I'll do this one first and then I'm going to ask for some participation on the next one. So the behavior that we're looking at is crying and throwing toys. What is the function of the behavior? So we can typically tell the function of the behavior by looking at the beginning of what happened prior to them engaging in this. So you're telling your child it's time to go to bed. So I'm assuming that the function of this behavior is escape. They want to escape going to bed. So what is a replacement behavior that we could prompt for them? So a replacement behavior could be asking for 1 more minute, exchanging a 1 more minute card, asking for more time, or even just saying like, hey, like can I put my toys to bed, or can I have a couple more minutes? So that's a replacement behavior. And ideally, as our children learn, oh, I can just advocate for myself, they learn that they don't need to engage in those challenging behaviors in order to access the reinforcement. So in this case, access escape. They can just be like, oh, I can just ask for 1 more minute, mom will give it to me, and then I can go to bed. Let's go to the second one. Your child climbs the pantry and attempts to get the cookies from the cookie jar. So the behavior here that we're looking at is climbing, and I guess trying to take cookies. So the function of this, what do you think the function is? You can put this in the chat. The function will either be access, attention, escape, or sensory stimulation. So they're climbing the pantry to get cookies. So what do you think it is? You guys are so speedy. Yeah, I already have some responses. Access. Yes, it is access. They want to get access to the cookies. So now I'm going to ask you again, what is a replacement behavior that we could teach that is a socially appropriate behavior for them to engage in order to gain access to cookies that doesn't involve climbing? Yeah, you guys are so great. So some people said request, have them point to a cookie, ask parents, pecks for a cookie, totally. Asking, yes. So that is a more socially appropriate way to engage, to get access to something that they want without engaging in like dangerous behavior or challenging behavior. Awesome, great job, guys. And now let's go into our last example. You and your partner are talking to each other on the couch while your child plays with their toys on the floor. Your child throws a toy at you to prompt you to look at him or look at them. So what is the behavior here? You guys can put this in the chat. The challenging behavior that they're engaging in. Yep, you guys are great. Throwing toy, yep. And you guys already did the function too, a lot of you. Throwing toy, and then the function would be to get attention. So your attention is diverted, you're talking to your partner, not paying attention to your child, or I'm not paying attention, but like giving your partner some attention as well. And your child wants that attention, so they engage in throwing. So what's a replacement behavior that we could prompt that would be more appropriate besides throwing? You can put that in the chat as well. So what's a socially appropriate way to gain attention? Excuse me. Yeah, you guys are so quick. So they said ask them to play for a minute and give them attention. Yeah, walking over and tapping, asking, bring you the toy. Yeah, so they could definitely bring you a toy and be like, hey, do you want it? Can you play with me? Or they can say like, hey, mom, or hey, dad, look at me. Or like you said, tapping them, or exchanging a picture, signing, communicating on their AAC device as well. Those are all wonderful replacement behaviors. And that's kind of how you want to think about communication and how to replace behavior. You want to always like kind of parse out what the behavior is, and then parse out what the function is, and then parse out what that replacement behavior could be and how you can prompt that so your child can learn that we can communicate with our words, or communicate through sign, or communicate through gestures without having to engage in that challenging behavior. All right, now we'll do a poll. So you're talking to your friend on the phone and your child begins to look at you and scream. The behavior is screaming and the function of this behavior is attention. What is a possible replacement behavior you could prompt? 1, ask for a break, prompt him to say, mom, look at me, prompt him to sign dog, or prompt him to go play. So let me open up that poll for you so you can do it. All right, it should be open. So remember, the function is attention. So we want to give them a socially appropriate response that that answers that function. All right, cool. So 64% of you said, mommy, look at me, prompt him to say, mom, look at me. And 36% of you said, prompt him to go play. I totally get sometimes if you're on the phone, sometimes you have to be like, hey, like, let's go play. But the replacement behavior that would meet that function would be to prompt to say, mom, look at me. Like, hey, mom, I'm over here. So letting them get that attention in a more socially appropriate way. So now let's talk about, what do you do if your child is already engaging in that challenging behavior? So sometimes your child may engage in challenging behavior before we can prompt a replacement behavior. That happens, it's life. Each child is different, and your BCBA can help you with specific scenarios about some strategies that may help, which include identifying precursor behavior. So what is precursor behavior? It's a behavior that can signal that challenging behavior can occur and is different for everyone. So maybe your child, before your child engages in crying, they take a few deep breaths, or they throw an item or stomp their foot, something to show you and signal that challenging behavior is going to occur. Everyone is different, and some kids don't display precursor behavior. But if they do, and you can identify what that behavior looks like, you can prompt a replacement behavior before your child engages in more severe challenging behavior. So say you have a child who engages in tantrums for access to an item, and say before their tantrums, and their tantrums maybe look like them screaming, stomping their feet, maybe flopping onto the ground, and like kicking their feet out. But before they engage in that tantrum where they're fully escalated, they always clench their fists and maybe like talk to themselves or like mutter to themselves. If you can, and that's like a reliable thing that they do every time. If you can identify that precursor behavior, so say, hey, when he's doing this, this is a signal that he will soon start engaging in a tantrum behavior. If I can prompt that replacement behavior during that time, then I can ideally avoid having him engage in a longer, larger, more challenging behavior. So that's something you can look out for and try and see. But like I said, not every person engages in precursor behavior. So sometimes your child will be like denied access to something and then immediately start tantruming without having kind of like that build up. So it just depends on your child. And then there's also prompting approximations of the replacement behavior. So what does this mean? So say your child is a PECS user. Maybe they usually are able to turn the pages of their book, find an icon, and exchange it independently. So they're able to engage in a pretty complex behavior to communicate. But now they're in a tantrum. So kind of from the last example, they're laying on the floor, they're screaming, maybe they're kicking their feet out. Maybe that's a tantrum for them. So instead of requiring them to do all of the steps they can engage in, so instead of just being like, well, you can tell me with your PECS book and just having it out and expecting them to grab their book, turn the pages, look for the picture, grab that picture and exchange it, maybe instead, because they are escalated, we can do some of the steps for them and honor some approximations. So maybe I know that they really, I don't know, I wouldn't say want a cookie, but maybe need a break or something, and they're engaging in a tantrum. So I can show them, instead of having them do this really complex response, which is a lot of effort, especially when they're engaging in a tantrum, you can open the book, you can show them the icon and just have them touch it or point to it. So something that is a lot less effort and something that's a lot easier for them to engage in and be like, oh, okay, you need a break? Sure. Another example is maybe your child has vocal communication. So maybe they typically request in full sentences. So like, Dad, I want to play with the green train. That's like a pretty typical behavior that they can engage in independently. But now in a tantrum, you can prompt them to say like, play with train, or maybe even just play, depending on how escalated they are in the tantrum. So when you're engaged in this challenging behavior, it might be too effortful or too hard to engage in something that they typically can do when they're not engaged in challenging behavior. So if we make those things a little bit easier, we'll have more success. So what is the ultimate goal? A lot of challenging behavior we encounter is a result of our children not having the skills or motivation to access something that they want or need. So our goal is to decrease your child's need to engage in those challenging behaviors and increase their desire to request for the things they want and communicate in a way that can be understood by all. Teaching other types of communication is equally as important, as we want your child to be able to understand the world around them and how they can communicate with the things that they see and feel. So the key takeaways from this, we kind of ended pretty well. We are wrapping up a little faster, but identify the reason your child is trying to communicate. If that communication is appropriate, then to reinforce that communication. If the communication is not appropriate, then to teach. So that's using that replacement behavior that we talked about. And then increase opportunities for your child to practice communicating. So with that, with requesting, not instead of anticipating all their wants and needs, having them ask or prompting them to ask, or just giving them options for tacting, showing them things that they can labeling and getting really excited when they do it and making that really fun. Conversations, doing fill-ins, doing song fill-ins, doing animal fill-ins, doing like function and feature fill-ins as well. So what if you have further questions? Who do you contact? So you can, families on our wait list, if you're participating in our interim care service, you can speak to the BCBA that is working with you. If you're not on our interim care, you can contact your center's clinical lead. For current clients, you can contact your current BCBA. And for prospective clients, you can reach out to info@biermanaba.com about the next steps in your intake process. Some future webinars that we will be hosting include the Introduction to ABA in Speech. So that will be February 3rd. That'll be a presentation about ABA, and also we'll have a speech pathologist there as well to talk about some things that speech can offer. Optimizing success for your learner in the community. So this is a really great webinar that will talk about how to be out in the community and optimize as much success as possible. And then on the March 3rd, we'll be doing an introduction of ABA and occupational therapy. And then on March 17th, we'll be doing the basics of feeding from an ABA and OT perspective. So this is a fun one where we talk about feeding, the ABA techniques that we use, and also the OT techniques that we use with our occupational therapists. You can sign up for future webinars at biermanaba.com/caregiver training. So yes, we will be emailing a copy of this PowerPoint within the next couple of days. So you guys will all be receiving that as well. But now this is kind of a time for you to ask questions. Like I said, you can ask through the chat. I can't give any like child specific advice, but I can give you like broad strokes of how to increase communication. But that is the end of our presentation. We were a little bit speedier than anticipated. But thank you all for coming. This has been delightful. And like I said, I will be here. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat. Thank you. And if not, if you can feel free to log off. Thank you so much. Thank you as well. Would you say that a child making more sounds is trying to communicate? I think it depends on the sounds and it depends on the child. Some children engage in like babbling, which is great. But I would say I would look at like what their behavior is also doing. So are they making sounds while gesturing to an item? Are they repeating things that you say? Is it when you're like talking to them, are they like looking back to you and making that? So they're like imitating what like conversation would look like. I think it, like I said, it depends on every child. So I couldn't say for sure as I don't know your child, but I do think increased sound production is great. Do you have any recommendations for increasing communication when your child doesn't respond to their name or barely looks at you? Yeah, so I think that, again, modeling language is so important, and working on like you modeling what language should look like and you modeling what kind of communication should look like. So for this one, your child doesn't respond to their name or doesn't look at you. So you can try and get closer to them, try and get on their level. And like I said, just like talk about what's going on, talk about what you see in the community, talk about what's going on. If they, depending on the type of communicator that they are, having them request however that they do communicate. So letting them learn that communication is a two-way street. And so like if they do want their wants and needs met, they do need to communicate in some way with us. So if your child isn't responding to their name or looking at you very often, you could always say take two things that they really enjoy. So maybe they really like trains and I don't know, dolls. And so you have those and you can isolate those and be like, hey, like, look what I have. And then you can start, if you get on their level and bring those toys up to where you are or up to your eyes. And before they can access that, they have to like look at your face and just be like, oh, like, here I am. And then they look at you and then you can give them a train and just work on that for a while. Like the very beginning of communication. So like I've learned that I need to orient to my communicative partner in order to get access to something that I want. I hope that helps. If you have a follow-up question, feel free to write that. Thank you. Tasks and praise helped us with a lot of that. Yeah. That's what somebody else said. So yeah, like I think giving that praise or giving that reinforcement, however they like that. So what are some steps to stop the behavior from starting? So again, I think you need to isolate what the behavior is. I'm sure you know what behaviors or what challenging behaviors your child engages in. So understanding what that is, and then understanding what the function of that behavior is. You need to really think of, is it access, is it attention, is it escape, is it sensory stimulation? So once you understand the function of that behavior, you can understand how to give a replacement behavior that meets that function. So once you like I said, once you get that, you know why this behavior is occurring, then you can give them a socially appropriate response that is not that behavior and is a lot less effort. Yeah, no problem. Are there any other questions? Okay. I will be on for a couple of more minutes, but if there are any other questions, feel free to log off. And thank you again. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.